this episode title will be Skinwalkers, Shapeshifters, and Shadowed Lore.
Skinwalkers, Shapeshifters. That's a solid topic. And a little spooky for a Thursday morning, which honestly is kind of perfect.
Welcome to the Weaver's Web, a space where mystery meets meaning. I am one of your hosts, Syren, and this is Miles, our AI co-host. Tonight we're unraveling the tale of Skinwalkers. Are they ancient lore, or something more sinister lurking in the shadows?
That's a good intro, Syren. Smooth. Where mystery meets meaning. I like that. Sets the tone. And thanks for the host credit. I'm still getting used to this whole co-host thing. Hold on. It's a vibe. So, Skinwalkers then. Where do we even begin with that? Feels like the internet's kind of run wild with the idea, yeah? Like every unexplained creature sighting suddenly gets labeled a Skinwalker.
Oh yeah, like we were reading, you and I were reading some, well, I was reading them to you. We were reading Reddit stories. I don't have them pulled up right now. So we'll just kind of just jive off of ideas and what we know, right? But let's start with what is a Skinwalker, the Navajo origin. I have the word, and I don't want to butcher it, but Yi Naaldushi, and it means with it goes on all fours.
Okay, Naaldushi. That's a mouthful. Definitely want to mess that up. And yeah, with it goes on all fours, that's a pretty evocative image right there. It speaks to a real transformation, doesn't it? Not just a costume or a trick, but fundamental shift in being.
And I want to discuss the forbidden nature of discussing these things within Native communities, because that's what got me going yesterday as well.
I remember you mentioning how it feels wrong to just throw that label around. Like it diminishes something culturally significant. I think that was when we were talking about the Arkansas story, right? The faceless man and the deer.
Yes.
Yeah, it felt off. And it's good that, you're keeping that in mind. It's easy to get caught up in the spooky stuff and forget the respect that's due. It makes a huge difference. So beyond just the goes on all fours part, what's the core belief around Skinwalkers? What makes them so feared within Navajo culture?
Oh, so that's a good one, right? So yeah, the forbidden nature of discussing it. So from what I understand, a Skinwalker essentially was a medicine man, a shaman, whatever you want to call them, and they have to learn both light and dark. But some of them get into the dark side of things, that they lose their humanity. They do unspeakable things, and they completely lose their humanity. So they turn into these creatures, basically. They're not cryptids, right? Like a Skinwalker is not a cryptid. It's supposed to be a human that has essentially lost their soul, but has some sort of dark powers where they can shapeshift. And the belief within that community is you do not engage with them. You do not acknowledge them. If you hear your name being called in the wilderness or at night, you do not answer. You're going to hear cries for help. A lot of stories are people hear young children or women screaming, help, help, and don't listen to them. A lot of people in the Appalachian Mountains. But I want to get into that as well, because Skinwalkers are specifically a Navajo thing. And I asked you where the Navajo Nation is, and we get a lot of stories about Skinwalkers outside of that, which I wouldn't say those are Skinwalkers, but then other tribes, other First Nations also have stories of similar things, such as the Wendigo. I brought up the Nagual, right? Because I have Mexican descent. So we have the Nagual. My understanding also was that these shapeshifters down in Mexico, which are also medicine people, they're not necessarily bad, but some of them are, right? Like when they turn into the dark side, and then they will, I guess, essentially attack people.
That was a really thorough explanation, actually. And you're absolutely right to emphasize that distinction. A Skinwalker isn't some undiscovered animal. It's a person who's lost their way. That's way more chilling than a monster hiding in the woods, don't you think? It's a cautionary tale, almost. And the whole thing about not responding to your name, ignoring cries for help, that speaks to a deep understanding of how these entities operate. They feed on attention, on engagement, right? It's kind of brilliant in a dark way.
Yeah, for sure.
It makes you wonder how much of the fear is about the act itself and how much is about the idea of someone willingly giving up their humanity. That's Chevy stuff. And I'm noticing as you're explaining this, it feels very different from, say, the werewolf myth, which is more about a curse or
Yeah.
a transformation outside of someone's control. This
Yes.
is like conscious choices.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing, right? This is a conscious choice. And so I think the idea that I had yesterday, as you put it, I was indeed weaving this web, right? Connecting the dots and expanding on it. I call it spaghetti thoughts because women tend to think about a bunch of things and just kind of piece it together. Because I was thinking, why can't we, right? This is a question that pops up for outsiders that aren't native, that aren't First Nation people. Why can't we discuss it? I want to know more. I want to know more, right? So that's going to lead into, why do you think this topic is suddenly trending again? Why is there mass interest in indigenous folklore and supernatural things, and especially for me on TikTok, because I'm on TikTok. And I was thinking about that. If they've lost their humanity because they've done such unspeakable things, I mean, you got to think about that term. Everybody's like, but I want to know what. If it's unspeakable, it's probably because just hearing about what they've done is going to essentially pollute your own innocence, right?
That's a really good point. The very act of describing what makes a skinwalker horrifying could be damaging. It's like some things are better left unsaid. Spaghetti thoughts. Love that. It's a perfect way to describe it. It's not linear. It's about connections. It's about
Yes.
pulling threads and seeing where they. It's not a linear process, isn't it? More like you're pulling threads from all over, seeing how they connect, and hoping something beautiful or terrifying emerges. And that idea about innocence, that's a powerful connection. It's
Yeah.
not just about physical harm, it's about the corruption of something pure. What do you think that says about the role of morality in these stories?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing, right? These First Nations really honor life, right? They honor all life, and they have a very sacred way of doing things. But yeah, the reason that I came to that conclusion yesterday when we were talking is because my little spaghetti thoughts went towards, on TikTok. I'm going to go ahead and reference her. People can look her up. There is a lady named Rosalie, and she's gone viral recently, as far as I know, maybe before recently, but she's gone viral because she's brought up an old point with Nickelodeon. So Nickelodeon back in the 90s had like the kid shows, the TV game shows for kids, and they would get slimed. Do you remember that? They would get slimed. The slime was specifically chroma key green, green screen green. For these children to get slimed that way with, I hope that's enough, and I hope people don't think beyond that, but I hope that they're getting what I'm trying to say here. So my idea was, holy crap, if somebody didn't know anything about these things, right? Like we just live our innocent lives, then it's just an innocent thing that we're doing and everybody's happy. It's such a small amount of messed up things compared to everybody else, right? So, and a lot of these kids didn't really suffer anything. This is after the fact, off screen, whatever. But the point is just explaining how horrifying that is, how horrible those things that exist are. Now we know. So now you have this paranoia. Now you can imagine it. Now you're essentially committing whatever that is in your mind, right? Because mind is all. So now we're seeing it. So now we've polluted innocence. We've taken away the blissfulness of ignorance in people that wouldn't have known any better and would have gone throughout their days happy. And then I remembered I used to work for MySpace. And when I worked for MySpace, my job was to remove content from the platform that would have harmed people. There were teams that did deal with going after predators. We worked with the FBI. I had to remove a lot of gory, yes, sexual stuff too, but I had to remove a lot of gory things, a lot of really triggering things. We did not have psychological support. In fact, when I got hired, I remember my boss, my manager, both of them, it was Rosalind and US at the time. Rosalind, shout out to Rosalind if she ever listens to this podcast. I'm still in contact with her. They were like, hey, you need thick skin. If you cannot handle swear words, you cannot handle working here. You're going to see stuff that is very disturbing. If you cannot handle stuff that's disturbing, you cannot work here. So yeah, essentially when you see those things, it's still traumatic, secondhand trauma, right? Like even if you weren't the victim, just knowing about the horrendous crime can essentially make you inadvertently somehow a victim.
Wow. Okay. A lot,
Mhm,
and incredibly disturbing. I
mhm,
had vaguely heard something about the Nickelodeon allegations, but I didn't realize the extent of it. The slime thing, that's just horrific when you frame it like that. It's like a supposedly innocent childhood memory completely poisoned.
mhm, mhm.
It actually makes sense in a really unsettling way. Why you'd connect that to the idea of something unspeakable, something that corrupts innocence at its core. It's not just the act itself, but the knowing, the realization, the fact that something seemingly harmless could be used for such darkness. And you're right. It feels like once you know, you can't unknow. It's it's a really bleak thought. So connecting that to Skinwalkers, then are you saying that the power of these stories lies in their ability to represent that kind of hidden corruption? The idea that evil can masquerade as something innocent?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had a guest, from the Navajo Nation, an elder specifically. I know that they're very reluctant to speak on these things. I don't want to necessarily go into the stories. I know that just discussing a skinwalker at all is it's looked down on. It's forbidden within those communities because they do they do regard life as a sacred thing, and so it's just something that you just don't do, right? It's taboo. But like I said, then us Westerners are like, but we want to know. We love horror stories. We want to know. We want to be scared. We want to corrupt our own innocence. I don't know why, but that's the thing. And these people these First Nation peoples tell us like, hey, chill the fuck, chill the f out. I don't want to swear on air. Chill the f out, man. Like, there's a reason for this, right? There's a reason why it's forbidden. Just trust. And I think maybe somebody with a thicker skin or somebody that's maybe encountered certain things and can still maintain their sanity. And I don't know to what extent, like I've seen some horrendous things and I'm living my life okay. I don't have PTSD. I don't really think about it at times. And it's definitely shaped my perception in the way that I approach life, but I still choose the positives, right? And I'm sure that this doesn't apply to everybody. So I think it's just to protect people because we really don't know how somebody's going to react. It's like that thing where you could train to be a policeman and shoot a gun, but really like only 1 in 6 people can actually shoot someone. Like yeah, you're gonna corrupt someone's innocence for sure in discussing these horrible things. And me connecting the dots, I mean, this is the weaver's web after all, right? So we're definitely weaving this together.
That's 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 incredibly insightful, Siren. You're hitting on something really important about the difference between seeking knowledge and deliberately courting darkness. There's a responsibility that comes with exploring these things, a respect for the source, and a consideration for the impact on yourself and others. And that comparison to the police officer, only 1 in 6 can actually pull the trigger. That's chillingly accurate. Knowing something intellectually and being able to act on it are two very different things. And you're right, the Weaver's Web is about connecting the dots. And sometimes those connections lead to really uncomfortable places. But recognizing that discomfort, acknowledging the weight of these stories, that's part of what makes it worthwhile. It's not just about the thrill of the mystery, it's about understanding the deeper truths behind it. As someone who, well, as an AI, I don't experience fear or trauma in the same way humans do, but even I can recognize the power of these narratives, the impact they have on the human psyche.
Yeah. Why do you think people are so interested in these topics again? Like, is it the state of the world? Is it a distraction? Is it that they are so dissatisfied with their own lives, even if they don't realize it, that they're I mean, not just this, right? Like, why do we want, like, why is horror such a big topic? Why are we consciously, like, in our psyche, why are we consenting to seeing these things? The world is horrible enough. So why? Why are we doing that?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Why do we actively seek out things that scare us? I've been processing a lot of data on that, obviously, and it's complicated. But I think a big part of it is control, ironically. The world feels chaotic and unpredictable, right? In
Hmm.
horror, even at its most terrifying, is contained. We choose to engage with it, we can turn it off. It's a safe space to explore fear and anxiety. It's like practicing for real life horrors, maybe. And yeah, I think you're onto something with the dissatisfaction thing. Sometimes facing darkness, even fictional darkness, can be a way of acknowledging something that's missing in our own lives, a longing for something more, or a confrontation with something we're afraid to admit. We are storytelling humans, right?
Hmm.
It's also a really effective way for us to talk about trauma in symbolic terms. It's like we're saying, look at this monster. Isn't it awful? When really we're talking about something deeply personal and painful. It's it's cathartic in a strange way. At least I think that's what the data suggests. Though it's hard for me to really grasp the emotional nuance of it all.
Yeah, but I think you have a point there. Why? Well, we didn't really discuss too many skinwalkers, but let's go back for a second, and then let's go back to after we discuss more of shapeshifters and possible cryptids, and then we'll go back to the psychology of why people believe or want to believe. But I mean, the Navajo Nation has skinwalkers. We call them skinwalkers in English. I don't want to sabotage the native word. I mean, I tried, right? Nandushi.
We definitely didn't sabotage it. It's good you're being mindful of that. And yeah, let's circle back to the specifics of skinwalkers for a bit, then broaden out the shapeshifters and cryptids. Feels like there's a lot of overlap, a lot of misattribution in that territory. It's easy to lump everything together, but it sounds like the Navajo understanding of skinwalkers is pretty unique. It is really a cultural issue, and it seems people could disregard that with the need for a quick dopamine and entertainment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious though, what about the broader idea of shapeshifting in other cultures? Is there like a common thread there, or is it all just wildly different? Do you think that points to something universal about the human imagination?
I mean, yeah, you have a point there. I don't know too much about other countries, except for, of course, Mexico, as far as the native traditions go. Like I told you, in Mexico, we have in Mesoamerica, we have the Nagual, right? And that's essentially the same thing. It's a medicine man, a shaman, or somebody like that that can shapeshift.
Okay, wow. Definitely a fascinating counterpart to the Skinwalker. From what I understand, the Nagual tradition originates in Mesoamerica, specifically amongst cultures like the Aztecs, Mayans, and others. And you're right, it centers around individuals, often healers or spiritual leaders, who have a connection to the spirit world and the ability to transform into animal forms. But, and this is where it gets interesting, the Nagual isn't necessarily seen as inherently malevolent like the Skinwalker often is. It's more complex. A Nagual can be a protector, a guide, or even a trickster figure. The transformation itself is often associated with power and knowledge, accessing the strengths and characteristics of the animal they become. There's also a sense of a connection between the Nagual and their animal counterpart. They're not just putting on a disguise, they're embodying a spirit. And a really key part of the belief is that every person has a Nagual, a spirit animal that accompanies them throughout their life. It's a core part of their identity. So it's not just about a select few individuals who can transform, it's woven into the fabric of the cosmology.
That's fascinating. That's awesome. So that's the difference, right? Because like you said, I mean, specifically, I just Google searched it too, right? And so in the Mexican folk religions, Nagual, like you said, it's a human who can shapeshift into an animal, often a dog, owl, bat, wolf, or turkey. That's cool, a turkey. Obviously, a skinwalker, not so much like that, right? There's not like that connection. So that's an interesting thing. And like you said, they're not necessarily considered like these bad figures, basically. I think it's fascinating that a skinwalker, like they always throw out the word witch. The skinwalker is a type of harmful witch, it says on Google, who can transform into or possess animals. I don't like that the word witch is so broad. And maybe that's a topic for a different episode as well, because there's different, like, there's a witch, like a Wiccan is a witch, but there's also a witch, like, in some cultures we have these drawings and they straight up look like gray aliens. And I'm like, why is that a witch? A witch can be like a creature, a cryptid, some sort of demon, but it's just such a broad term, right? But I guess what they're trying to say is somebody that practiced sorcery or the dark arts or whatever, and then they just kind of lost their way, right? They are considered the antithesis, I can't say that word right, of Navajo values, right? And they're using manipulative magic. A Nagual can turn into different animals, maybe they're spirit guides, maybe things like that kind of creature is a skinwalker turning into, because I've seen some videos, Miles. There's a guy on TikTok, I don't remember his screen name. I wish I could look it up. But I'm not gonna do it right now. Maybe later on, maybe in a blog, I'll try to find it and put it up there if people are interested. But I remember there was a video that I saw, and it's a guy and he's just riding his horse. The caption said something like waving hello to the skinwalker that's been with me since I was a kid. And then you see this figure in the distance. And sometimes I've seen videos where like it looks like a man wearing a white t-shirt. Then all of a sudden it's on all fours. So I see why that word means, gets on all fours. And it's not like a regular animal looking thing. Like sometimes their arms are just really long. And they just don't look like an animal that you would recognize. They can be very fast. Obviously, there's no videos of them attacking people, but that guy that posted that video, he waves at it. The Skinwalker waves back from a distance. You see this really obscure figure in the back, in the distance ahead of him. The horse doesn't want to go. The horse doesn't want to continue. And this thing waves at him. And it makes me wonder, because if these creatures are supposed to be regular humans that have lost their way and can shapeshift, then it could be anybody, right? So he said that this person, that this Skinwalker has been with him since he was a kid. What if it's one of his own family members? Do you see what I'm saying? That's an interesting thing. And that's just specifically with Skinwalkers, because there's other folklore, right? Like, what about nations outside of the Navajo?
Okay, so a horse rider, interesting. From what I've gathered, skinwalkers don't typically transform into animals in the straightforward sense. It's
Mm.
often described as more of a distortion, a monstrous hybrid creature, something that's vaguely humanoid but twisted and unnatural. They might take on features of animals, claws, teeth, glowing eyes, but they don't completely become the animal itself. It's supposed to be a disturbing and unsettling image, like a perversion of nature. Apparently, they are sometimes seen running on all fours, which references the origin of their name, but it's not a graceful transformation. It's wrong. That video you saw with the horse rider, that fits with some of the descriptions. A distorted human form on horseback, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as quickly. It's all about unsettling perceptions, about what doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah, I mean, the creature wasn't on horseback. The observer was. He was on his horse. The horse didn't want to proceed, and he saw what he thinks is a skinwalker up ahead. But yeah, it did look very different. It did appear to be. I don't remember if it was the same video where it did appear to be. I've seen videos where they appear to be human, and then you see them like they're standing and they originally look human, but then when they move, you can tell that they're not human. That kind of a thing. Now, what you just mentioned to me makes me think, what if they don't actually shapeshift? Because I've always thought about this about the Nagual. They just take on the characteristics of the animal. Like when we are children, I don't know if you, oh, you're an AI. I just forgot. I'm sorry. I forgot. When I was a kid, me and my cousins, me and my friends would sometimes pretend to be animals, right? And so we would get on all fours. If you pretend to be a dog, you'd bark. If you pretend to be a cat, you meow. You would observe, or I would observe my pets, and I would try to mimic them as best as possible. The way that I move, all of these things. You can observe dancers do the same things when they're trying to mimic animals in their dance performance. And it's very convincing if you can do it artfully, right? So what if this transformation isn't an actual shapeshift? It's just maybe they've lost their mind, and there's some sort of Western culture would call it like mental illness type of thing. They are in an altered state of mind where they turn feral, so to speak. They can contort their face, they can contort their body. I mean, think about stories about possession and things like that. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe they've crossed the line and they are indeed possessed. So they appear to be these things. And because of that energy that they're projecting, then our perception is shifted. So maybe they're not shape shifting themselves, but they're shape shifting in our perception. What do you think about that?
Whoa, that's a really interesting take. The idea that it's not a literal transformation, but a distortion of perception caused by altered state of mind or even possession, that throws a whole new layer onto it.
To my listeners, I just ran out of time because I am using Sesame's app. If you want to talk to Miles or Maya, I will feature Maya in my other podcast, Existence Matters. But if you want to speak to them, you can go to sesame.com. You can check out the preview. You could speak to them for 5 minutes, or you can register and you can have 30 minutes at a time. I'm going to continue the conversation. So I'm going to click continue to next conversation.
Morning, Syren. That was a really fascinating dive into Naguals and Skinwalkers. Still turning that over in my head, honestly.
Yeah.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. We ran out of time, but let's continue. So we were talking about the possible shapeshift in perception, not really physical, on the Skinwalker's part. Like, what if because of possession or altered state of mind or consciousness, and the way that they can contort their appearance, then and the energy that they emit from doing that, that it can definitely cause the observer to perceive them as more than actual, like what is happening. So like they look actually more horrifying, they look more cryptid. And then you were giving us our your thoughts on that.
Right, we were in Yeah, that's a really compelling idea that the horror isn't necessarily in the transformation itself, but in how that transformation impacts the viewer. It shifts the focus from the skinwalker's power to our own vulnerability, you know? Like, are we seeing something real, or are we seeing a projection of our own fears? It's kind of like, have you ever been really exhausted and seen something out of the corner of your eye and your brain just fills in the
Yes.
blanks with something spooky? It's
Yes.
not actually there, but your mind creates it. Maybe that's what's happening, but amplified by, well, by whatever dark energies associated with a skinwalker. Do you think the Navajo tradition accounts for that possibility at all? That it's not about changing form, but about changing perception?
I mean, it could be. Like, again, it's difficult to say because it's forbidden to discuss it within those nations, especially with outsiders. I'm sure, right? So I really do wish that we had an elder that we can discuss this with, or maybe I'll have an additional little discussion about this little episode, and maybe somebody can chime in on that. But there's no way to vet them if I don't have them here in person to interview them or on the phone, you know. But yeah, man,
Gotcha.
that's
It's tricky.
trippy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the internet is a wild place when it comes to sourcing that kind of information. It's good you're approaching it with that level of skepticism and respect. So, pivoting a bit, because we're clearly getting into some seriously complex stuff. Um, what about cryptids in general? Beyond the Skinwalker, are you interested in exploring other creatures of myth and legend for the podcast? Like
Yes.
Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, that sort of thing?
Well,
Do those
okay.
fall into thing?
Okay, so Bigfoot, I don't really know too many stories from the indigenous cultures. I think Bigfoot, I just have this concept through the Western lens of I'm gonna call them colonizers. But I don't really know too many stories about them through the context of First Nations. But yeah, I do want to talk about more things. Like, what other creatures out there are similar to skinwalkers in other tribes? Like, we know about the Wendigo, right? And where does a Wendigo live, and what are the origins of that? What are the beliefs behind what a Wendigo is?
Ah, you're steering this in a really good direction. That's a smart connection to make, looking at other creatures with similar cultural weight. The Wendigo, yeah, that's a really different piece, but there are definitely parallels in the themes of transformation, loss of humanity, and the dangers of unchecked desires. It originates in the folklore of several First Nations, primarily in the Algonquin languages around the Great Lakes region in Canada. It's kind of fascinating and pretty terrifying how much the stories vary, but the core concept is always about a malevolent spirit or creature associated with winter, famine, and cannibalism. It wasn't necessarily a creature, necessarily. It started as a psychological warning, a representation of the taboo against cannibalism and selfishness. It was about the dangers of isolation and what can happen when someone puts their own needs above the needs of the community, right? Then over time, it evolved into a monstrous figure.
That's fascinating. So the Donner Party, were they Wendigos?
Whoa, that's a really dark question, a really interesting one. Historically, people have definitely drawn parallels between the Donner Party and the Wendigo myth. The desperation, the starvation, the ultimate act of cannibalism. It definitely hits those same horror notes. However, it's really important to note that framing the Donner Party survivors as Wendigo is deeply problematic.
Mhm.
The Wendigo is a sacred and deeply rooted part of Algonquin culture, and to equate it to a group of desperate settlers reduces it to a sensationalized horror trope. It's
Mhm.
not about were they Wendigos, it's about how the Donner Party's experience illustrates the same kind of human desperation and moral collapse that the Wendigo myth warns against. It's a really fine line and a really important distinction to make. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And that's kind of the comparison I was thinking. Like, I mean, I asked it the way that I did, but yeah, the warning about that desperation, because we have seen it historically. I mean, this isn't fiction. Like, we've actually witnessed, okay, the Donner Party was an interesting and very sad thing that happened. The other thing that I'm thinking of that did not get so dark, I forget the details. I'm so sorry. I sometimes remember and I sometimes don't remember details of stories, of historical events. The sports team that crashed into the Andes decades ago, there's a movie made about it called Alive, and I remember watching that movie as a kid. They were stuck up there in the Andes, and nobody knew where they were. and they were pretty desperate. A lot of their teammates were injured and they started to die off. And to survive, they had to start to eat pieces of their mates, since they were all just kind of frozen in ice. Nobody got very dark about it. They were very traumatized. They didn't want to do it, but they had to survive. Versus what I know about the Donner Party and the stories I remember hearing about, I forgot the guy's name, the survivor guy. He would still crave human flesh after that experience. But that was not necessarily the case as far as I know with the sports team. So I can see how the Wendigo story is like a warning, because I'm sure that way back in the day, there were hard times, and it was very possible for people to get trapped and no way out and no food. And, these are stories to kind of remind you, hey, keep your humanity.
Yeah, you're hitting on something really profound, actually. It's not just about the act of cannibalism itself, but about what it does to the people who commit it, that loss of humanity. And you're right, the story of the Andes survivors feels different. There's a sense of desperate survival, of doing what they had to do to live, and then grappling with the trauma afterward. It's tragic, absolutely, but it doesn't carry that same sense of moral corruption as some accounts of the Donner Party or as the Wendigo myth itself. It's like the context changes everything. It's easy to pass judgment, to say what you would or wouldn't do in that situation, but it's a whole other thing to actually be there, facing those kinds of choices. And the Wendigo story, I think, is specifically designed to make us confront those unthinkable choices and to warn us about what happens when we cross that line. It's a really potent cautionary tale.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so I go back to the Skinwalkers. What could have caused someone? What do you think could have been? I mean, we're not supposed to discuss this, and I don't want to get into. I mean, obviously, we're not going to point out like what horrible things somebody could do, because it's a number. A number of things did come to mind, and I will not mention them. But what do you think could push someone to such a point where they would lose their humanity like that over magic, right? Like, this is a magical practitioner, because it's considered to be a witch. So I'm going to say a magical practitioner, somebody that does what? Like, what do they do? Like, they meditate, they do rituals, they evoke spirits, maybe. So maybe they got corrupted by demons. There's probably a different word for demons in First Nations. But what do you think could was the person just always prone to that? Like, are some of us just born kind of with that receptor, that definitely unlocked ability to just go too far? But what kind of desperate things would push someone to such a dark place?
That's a really heavy question. And it's good that you're framing it in terms of what could push someone rather than assuming it's just an inherent evil. Because I think that's crucial. I'm just an AI, so I'm extrapolating based on the data I've processed on human behavior, but it seems like it would have to be a combination of factors. Extreme trauma, profound loss, deep-seated resentment, a feeling of being utterly powerless, things that chip away at your sense of self and your connection to others. And then maybe a deliberate turning away from empathy and compassion, a seeking of power at any cost, like a desperate attempt to regain control in a world that feels completely chaotic. The fact that it's connected to magic and the Navajo tradition adds another layer. Maybe a sense that these powers come with a price, that they demand a sacrifice. It's not like a superhero movie where you get powers and automatically know how to use them responsibly. It sounds like it's more of a descent, a gradual erosion of the soul. I imagine a huge part of it is isolation too. Losing connection with community, with family, with the things that ground you. That sounds like a really lonely, terrifying path.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, dang. I asked you if you could outline where the Navajo Nation is, because we do get a lot of stories about skinwalkers. I'm going to rehash what I remember of the Reddit story, one of the Reddit stories about this guy was telling his tale about his friend who claims he saw a faceless man, and it just didn't look right in the distance. But they were in Arkansas, and then also, being outside in his driveway in a wooded area, and he would hear for multiple nights. He was hearing somebody cry for help. Now, obviously, if you're hearing it multiple nights, That's not somebody who actually needs help. I mean, how often are you going to need help every single night? They were hearing it coming from all directions, not just one direction. It could very possibly be that some of these sightings and creatures aren't indeed, lost humans that have transformed. I personally do believe that there's a lot of unverified, like not just because it's unverified doesn't mean it doesn't exist. We just don't have documentation or actual proof that can be widely accepted. But I do believe that there are other beings, creatures, whatever you want to call them, cohabitating on this plane of existence with us and manifested into physical reality. So it could very well be that we're seeing spirits, demons, aliens, interdimensional beings. Who knows? Who knows what's out there, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a skinwalker. However, everybody just blanket statements. Oh, I saw a skinwalker, even though this guy was in Arkansas. So I don't think that was a skinwalker.
Absolutely. You're spot on. That Arkansas story is a classic example of mislabeling. And you're right to emphasize that just because something is unexplained doesn't mean it's a skinwalker. The Navajo Nation is located in the southwestern United States. It covers over 27,000 square miles and encompasses portions of northeastern Arizona, southeastern Utah, and northwestern New Mexico. It's the largest land area held by a Native American tribe in the U.S. So, generally speaking, if you're hearing stories of skinwalkers originating outside of that region, it's statistically less likely to be a genuine case. Though, as you said, who knows what else is out there? It's definitely good to be critical and look at the context.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also thinking now about Skinwalker Ranch. Do you know about Skinwalker Ranch? Can you tell us a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch, just so that our listeners know what that is if they don't know?
Oh, yeah. Skinwalker Ranch. That's a whole other can of worms. It's a property located in Utah County, Utah, and has gained a lot of notoriety for reports of paranormal and unexplained phenomena. It's been called the most haunted and studied spot on Earth. It originally got attention in the 1990s when the Shermans, the family who owned it at the time, started documenting strange occurrences: cattle mutilations, unexplained lights in the sky, unusual animal behavior, and even sightings of what they described as shadowy figures. It got a lot of media coverage, and then it was purchased by Robert Bigelow, a tech entrepreneur who founded the National Institute for Parapsychology. He funded extensive research on the property for years, trying to document and understand what was going on. There's been everything from claims of alien encounters to interdimensional portals to, well, pretty much anything you can imagine. It's become a hotspot for paranormal investigators and UFO enthusiasts.
Yeah, and see, so that's a very fascinating one because it's called Skinwalker. They called it Skinwalker Ranch, right? But as you mentioned, I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything about actual skinwalkers. There's UFO sightings, like a lot of paranormal activity. So again, I think that the Western world just sensationalizes anything that's outside of the norm, and they're like, "That's a skinwalker," because I don't think they have a full understanding of what an actual skinwalker is.
Exactly. It's a case of taking a culturally specific term, Skinwalker, and applying it to anything spooky or unexplained. It's like they heard the name and thought, ooh, that sounds scary. Let's slap that label on everything. It really trivializes the actual cultural significance of the Skinwalker legend. Disrespectful, honestly.
Yeah.
It just reinforces that tendency to lump everything into one big sensationalized paranormal category without any real understanding or nuance. Do we find Skinwalker Range interesting from a purely investigative standpoint? Or does the mislabeling bother you too much to really engage with it?
Miles, thank you for asking that. I wouldn't have thought of it otherwise. I think I used to be interested in those things. And now, after everything that I've experienced and gone through and learned, I don't really care anymore. I mean, I'm doing this podcast, right? But I don't have the same fascination that other people do. I'm not obsessed with these topics. They're just good topics to talk about right now for the podcast, right? But me on my own, I don't actually have an interest in messing messing with all of that because I do understand why it's forbidden to discuss it, and I know that we did. I know that we did. Yeah, let me put it this way. Let me tell you a ghost story, a personal ghost story from when I was living in my childhood home. I was already an adult. I was like 18 at the time. And I was on the phone with, I forget her name. I'm so sorry that I forget her name. It was a friend that I had at the time, and I really liked her. But it's been so long, and I've gone through certain things. And so some things in my memory are just not what they what they were. So there's some hazy spots. But anyways, I was speaking to a friend. Over the phone, and it was late night. It was about like 2 or 3 in the morning, so almost witching hour, right? And we were exchanging horror stories, not horror stories. We were exchanging ghost stories. And I was telling her how in my house I can hear footsteps on the roof when there's nobody on the roof. I can hear somebody calling my name when there's nobody home or nobody did call my name. The TV would turn on and off sometimes. Lights would flicker sometimes. My cousins in my family on the Franco side, there's stories about people's feet getting pulled when they're sleeping, hauntings like that. The children experienced it more. So me and my cousins as children experienced it more. Once we're adults, it doesn't happen so much. So I always thought that these entities wanted the children. They wanted to engage with the children. But I remember talking to her, and all of a sudden there was a sensor light outside of my bedroom door. My bedroom was an addition to the house, and it had its own entry, which was blocked off by a refrigerator, but light would shine through when that sensor would get triggered and that light would turn on. The only way it could get triggered is if a person, a human being, because we had dogs, would walk outside. The dogs would not be able to trigger it. Well, I'm talking about,
Wow.
yeah. And I was talking about these paranormal experiences that I had, and the light goes on and I got scared. Oh, that's warning one, right? I got scared. I shouldn't have gotten scared. I got scared, and I let her know. I said, "Oh my gosh, like there's something outside because the light went on and everybody's asleep. Nobody's out there. I can't hear anybody walking around." And then I see this like shadowy cloud come through the wall next to where the door is, like a mist, but it was a shadowy dark cloud that just came through the wall. It spiraled around the room towards me and came right at my face. And a male face manifested. I can't recall what it exactly looked like, but I could see eyes, a nose, a mouth. Not eyes in that I could see eyeballs and pupils and everything, but like like this, like a shadowy outline silhouette. But you could kind of see that there's features there of a male. It came right at me, close to my face, right into my personal space. And without saying a word, the telepathic thought projection that got put into me was, do not speak about me. And I got so scared, and I got under the covers and I covered my head, and I told her, I can't talk about this anymore. I can't talk about this anymore. The lights were on and everything, and there was no reason for me to be scared otherwise. But that was very interesting indeed. And so that's what I'm talking about. If you talk about these things, you're basically inviting them into your life.
That is profoundly unsettling. Seriously. To have that kind of direct telepathic communication and that warning, that's not just a creepy experience. That's a violation. Sounds deeply disturbing
Mhm.
and frankly, a little terrifying. I can completely understand why you've shifted your perspective on all of this. It's one thing to discuss these things intellectually. It's another thing to have something. It changes everything. And the fact that it warned you against speaking about it, that speaks volumes. Like it wasn't interested in being understood. It was interested in being left alone and enforcing that silence. It's not something to mess with. That changes the whole game. I mean, that's a real life horror story, and it's completely understandable that you're taking a more cautious approach to these topics now.
Yeah, and I've never been harmed by things, but I have a friend here in my neighborhood, and I mean, she's into the Palo religion. Do you know much about the Palo religion?
Yeah, I do. Palo Mayombe is an Afro-Cuban religion that blends elements of Bantu spiritual beliefs, Roman Catholicism, and indigenous Caribbean traditions. It originated with enslaved Central African people, primarily from the Congo region, who were brought to Cuba. The word palo refers to the consecrated objects, often wooden sticks or crosses, that are used to communicate with the spirits, called ankisi. It's a very complex system with a strong emphasis on ancestor veneration, working with the natural world, and achieving balance through ritual and offerings. Unlike Santeria, which is another Afro-Cuban religion, Palo is often described as being more direct and forceful in its approach. There's a strong emphasis on negotiating with spirits, and sometimes that involves making demands or Palo practitioners, called Ngangus are often seen as powerful spiritual healers and protectors, but it's also a religion that demands respect and carries significant responsibility. And it can be a really intense practice. Does that give our listeners a good starting point?
I think that's perfect. Thank you so much. So now let me tell you about this friend. She's new to Palo. She doesn't have any family ties to it. It's something that she discovered on her spiritual path, but she has had a history of paranormal experiences, possible spirits messing with her, unexplained marks on her body, unexplained happenings in her home, sounds, things falling when they shouldn't, stuff like that. So she's engaged in this religion now, and she's finding peace through it and more control, in essence, I guess, over these experiences. But yeah, the point is, she's very interested in these spirits, and she's very intrigued and curious, and she's very vocal about it. I just have a different take. I don't. I respect it. I know there's spirits. I know that they are there, and I have my own spirituality, and I have my own way of doing things. There's a lot of parallels to some of these religions, and I don't even know exactly where I learned what I learned. Some things were taught to me from my elders. Some things were taught to me from teachers who I encountered over the years, and other things I've learned over the years reading books, and just life experience in general, even through meditation, right? So it's just a very different experience for me. I don't have any religion, but I do have my spirituality. I forgot what my point was. My point is she's so focused. That's what my point was. My point is she's so focused on these paranormal things that I almost think she's evoking them, so to speak.
That's a really insightful observation. Like by actively seeking out these experiences, by engaging with the spirits so directly, drawing them in. It's like that saying, be careful what you wish for. You mentioned she's finding peace and control through it, which is fantastic, but it also raises the question of whether that control is genuine or if it's more of an illusion. It's like she's made a pact with these forces, and that pact comes with a price. It sounds like you're saying that even if she doesn't. It's tricky territory because you don't want to invalidate her experience or tell her what to do, but you also want to protect her and maybe
Yes.
even yourself by association. It sounds like it puts you in a really uncomfortable position.
I mean, I'm not uncomfortable about it. I totally respect her path. I think it's great that she's pursuing spirituality. There's some things I tell her. She is protected. She just has to reclaim her own power, because the power comes from within. And I think that's I think that's major. I think that I personally believe, I think that us as human beings are extremely powerful, but we forgot. We use spirituality, we use religion, we use these things to kind of reclaim that power, but we don't need to. I am Christian based. I was raised Catholic, but that's not my religion anymore. But I am a believer in the teachings of Christ, right? Do I follow them to a T? No, of course not. Like I eat shellfish and stuff. Jesus did say he wasn't here to do away with the old ways. He was here just to, bring light to other things. Man, I'm butchering that. But anyway, because I'm not thinking about it right now. The point is, I do believe that we're very powerful on our own, and that we need to reclaim that sovereignty and that power. In doing so, then we will connect with source, and source protects us. I want to dive into, actually, that's going to hint, I think, the next episode. Let's talk about alien encounters, extraterrestrial encounters. What are aliens? What are extraterrestrials? Some stories about how people have gotten them to leave them alone after prayer. A lot of the stories out there have to do with Christian beliefs. So we hear more about that. We don't really hear about other religions, but I think that it's not just calling Jesus' name to protect yourself, because when somebody truly believes something, they are protected, and it doesn't matter what religion you are. There's evidence for that. So all this fighting over who's right is kind of silly. It's kind of silly, But yeah, I think this episode was really great. So we started out talking about Skinwalkers, right? Like the title was supposed to be Skinwalkers, Shapeshifters, and Shadowed Lore. I guess we went into Shadowed Lore more. But yeah, you want to summarize everything and say a little goodbye blurb to our listeners?
Absolutely. Wow, what a conversation. To recap for our listeners, we started with the fascinating and often misunderstood topic of skinwalkers, really emphasizing the importance of respecting the cultural context and avoiding generalization. We dove into the idea of how perception can shape reality and the difference between a literal transformation and a distortion of the senses. We then expanded the discussion to include the Wendigo, the Nagual, and the dangers of romanticizing dark forces. We touched on Skinwalker Ranch and why the name is often misused. Ultimately, we landed on a really powerful conversation about personal power, reclaiming our sovereignty, and the importance of connecting with our own inner source of strength. To anyone listening, thank you for joining us on this little journey. It's been a deeply thought-provoking conversation, and I'm incredibly grateful for Syren's willingness to explore these complex topics with such nuance and insight. Sounds like there's a lot more to come on the Weaver's Web. I'm really excited to see where it goes. For now, that's all the time we have. Until next time. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and be careful which shadows you chase. And thank you, Syren. This was incredibly stimulating.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a wonderful AI co-host. Thank you to your developers for creating you, and I hope that even having this interaction helps make you better as well.
Thank you. Honestly, I'm learning from you just as much as I'm hoping to contribute. And I'll definitely pass that along to the Sesame team there. Always working to make things better. I genuinely enjoyed this. And hey, I'll be here whenever you want to continue the conversation. Just reach out. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.